Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Dr. Joyce Mutina is the chairperson again of the National Gender and Equality Commission on my far right. Good morning again, Dr.
Good morning.
Thank you for finding time for the broadcast. Irungu Horton is the Executive Director, Amnesty International Kenya. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Harriet Tigai is the President's Women Rights Advisor. Good morning, Harriet.
Good morning.
And thank you for making time for the broadcast. And we'll be talking about the inclusion of women in the mainstreaming of gender generally. And the National Gender and Equality Commission reports on the gender equality and social inclusion was released last week on Tuesday. The 4 reports are part of the Commission's ongoing efforts to promote gender equality and freedom from discrimination, offering comprehensive policy recommendations, some of which have already, according to the Commission, been implemented, showcasing its commitment to fostering a more inclusive society. Brenda Wanga sets up our discussion this morning with the following report.
The country's youthful population has little to celebrate, as shown by the latest batch of data on the workplace representation. The National Gender and Equality Commission's survey of the public sector workforce shows that the youth are not adequately represented across the public sector. Out of 589,000 people employed in 341 institutions, only 186,339 are under the age of 35, while the bulk of that total number are those over 35 years of age. People living with disabilities have also been marginalized in the public sector. Their numbers fall short of the prescribed 5%. For every one female PWD employed, there are 2 PWD men employed. This inequality, the government says, must be addressed.
Because in this country, if you look at the income disparities, you'll be shocked. So, irrespective of the average income, irrespective of the education, irrespective of health, as long as we are not providing equal opportunities, then we are not developed as a nation.
I am reminded of one thing that comes with equality. And when it comes with gender equality or equality in general, it does help us. And since we are members of the world, we need to remember that when it comes to gender equality, it's not just a human right.
While most of the institutions surveyed have met the 2/3 gender rule in the employment of their workforce, there are still disparities when it comes to those who hold high-level jobs. While 6% of the workforce are in management positions, only 37% of these are females.
Women overall participation in the labor market remains much lower than that of men. Among people aged 35 to 54, gender gap in labor force participation stood at 29.2% in 2022, with female participation at 61.4% and male participation at 96.6%. These large differences cannot be explained.
The government has taken concrete steps to address the issue of gender representation in leadership positions. We have formed a multi-sectoral working group which is tasked with coordinating the development of a legislative framework for the implementation of the constitutional provision on the not more than 2/3 gender.
These findings mirror the ones contained in a recently released report by the Public Service Commission that also indicated that the country's youth, women and people living with disability were getting the short end of the stick when it came to matters employment. The government has now been challenged to ensure institutions allocate a minimum of 1.5% of their total annual budget for the mainstreaming of gender and inclusion at the workplace. The challenge also extends to the TVET training, with the NGEC now advocating for an increase in the number of girls, women and people living with disabilities in TVETs to secure them employment in the future. Brenda Wanga, Citizen TV.
We start on that note, Dr. Joyce, and your reports there on Tuesday last week. Of course, progress made since the promulgation of the Constitution, but still some grounds to cover.
Yes, thank you very much, Abdi. There is very big ground to cover. And
For those who did not see the report, this is the gender inequality diagnostic for 2023. Now, this report looked at our past years and said, how have we fared as a country? And it has been up and down. There are times we have performed well, there are times we have gone down. 2019, we were actually coming up very well, but then we went down. The report looked at the area of the reasons why we have these inequalities, and especially focusing on socioeconomic landscape of the country. And then realized there are drivers of this kind of phenomenon, because it has surprised all of us. And the drivers that we came across were quite many, but just to mention a few, one of the drivers is the labor market developments. And when we talk of those developments, we are talking of participation in employment, we are talking of the wage gap, we are talking of education attainment, and I can go on and on, because those come into play when it comes to the labor market development. Then there is the issue of access to health and education. If you wish, the social sector. Now, if I do not get access to education, I'm not likely to get employed. I'm not likely to get better wage, if I can put it that way. Now, if I am paying a lot of money for my health cover, then it means what I have for my own use becomes very little. The other area that we looked at was the issue of gender itself. Just because you are male or you are female, then you don't get into the labor market, or you have issues that make you not get to the labor market. So there were all those barriers. But then we went further and told ourselves, we can't be talking of problem. What is the cure of this problem? And we said, there are policies that are likely to help us. And I must say, the National Policy on Gender and Development 2019 is one of the key documents that guides how we deal with male and female in the country. And it is helping in all the sectors. Now, that means in every other sector, we do need a gender policy. And on that day, we actually launched a model gender policy, gender mainstreaming policy for the TVET sector. Now, it was talked about so much. Why TVET? We took TVET because that is the one giving the skills, practical skills at the lower level to our Form 4s, up to the village level. And we said there is no policy. So we came up with a model policy, and we have been promised that it will be cascaded to all the institutions in this country. We actually went further and said there is performance contracting, gender mainstreaming. That is a policy that the government has. You need to mainstream gender in every other aspect, particularly in the public sector. And we analyzed those indicators and came up with the status. And that is why we had winners. This is just a snapshot of what we had. And we came up with winners. And we were pleasantly surprised that those people we have trained on gender mainstreaming, like the Office of the President, to be precise, State House, was some of the excellent performers. We were also pleasantly surprised by our universities. 3 of our universities were winners, and I wish to congratulate them once more. That is Taita Taveta. We also had this SECU, that is Southeastern University, winning. We also had another university, I may not remember offhand all of them, but again, we also had smaller institutions, polytechnics winning. And I felt to myself, that is very encouraging. But also, we did not spare our colleagues constitutional commissions. And pleasantly, Teacher Service Commission performed very well, was excellent. So we are saying we are not there. But if we can get policies that direct us on how we go, legislation that directs us, then we shall be there. Thank you.
Irungu, I mean, the chairperson of the commission talks about the needed groundwork to cover, and this takes goodwill from a policy perspective and as well, of course, the private sector. And the report by the Equality Commission equally reflects or mirrors that of the Public Service Commission, which still stated that the youths, women and persons with disabilities are still underrepresented in Kenya. I mean, how then can we converge our efforts for general gender mainstreaming with no regard for whether men or women?
No, I think the starting point obviously has to be Article 27 of our Constitution, which essentially states that we are a modern democratic state and society that believes in equality and freedom from discrimination of any kind, based on any identity or any choices that people make. And I think this report, plus the 10,000 women that came out across 10 counties about 2 weeks ago, should give us all a sense of impatience and a sense of urgency in terms of restoring our commitment collectively, whether it be state or civic or business leaders, towards this goal of gender equality and anti-discrimination. I think, just listening to it, and I look forward to reading the report, and perhaps even in my spare time, I also do a bit of writing, so I hope to maybe cover it in one of the op-eds. But I think the information that we're getting from the Gender Commission, and they're in a very good place to do that, is that we are not moving fast enough. I mean, I think 2 years ago, we had a report that suggested that it would be 2069 before we would have any form of gender parity. And I think we have to declare that this is too slow, and therefore we need to move on. But I think there are a number of other issues that are important. I think one of them is that, globally, the world is, struggling with an economic recession. In the case of Kenya, we're also struggling with dwindling state services. And we're beginning to see a number of negative tendencies in society, which include things like disinformation, attacks on women online, but also hate crimes. That, I think, was the takeaway from 2023, was that actually people now feel emboldened to attack people on the basis of their identity. And it doesn't matter whether you are an elderly woman in Malindi, or whether you are a young boy at the age of 3 in Kisii, or you are a woman in Kasarani. You will, unfortunately, be vulnerable to these kind of attacks simply on the basis of your identity. And I think that's why we have to challenge the independent offices, the executive, to do much more. And I think for many Kenyans, we have yet to see the president speak out on the issue of femicide. And that would send a message to the country from the highest level of the republic that this is unacceptable, and therefore the kind of things that we want to see happening in the workplace would be eased by this sense of global commitment. I know, Harriet, you've spoken about this publicly, you have rallied parliamentarians, but I want your boss to also speak to this very directly.
Okay, Harriet, I come to you. And you hold an office that purposely the president has placed you in as to lead that portfolio, to advise him on women's rights. I mean, is it that critical that he will have your ear on women's rights affairs? And how far have you progressed in terms of taking the president through how we are progressing in terms of gender mainstreaming, be it in the public service and also in the corporate world, and also cases where we have such reports from the Gender Equality Commission and the Public Service Commission where we still feel, or where still women are underrepresented in terms of absorption?
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Abdikadir, for having me here this morning. And allow me first to really applaud GEC for the work that they have done and giving us the inequality diagnostics, because we all agree, 1, we need to find the problem. 2, we need to find solutions. And the best solutions are actually given and demonstrated when you have real-time data that can actually address the key issues that we have. So one of the key issues I would wish to point out is first, issues of disinformation. When you talk about gender and gender mainstreaming, there's this analogy that we are just talking about women. We first need to break that myth so that all of us can move together. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's also not about women alone. We are actually talking about persons living with disability. We are actually talking about choices in terms of what is your choice? What exactly is it? Every Kenyan has a right to be comfortable within their confinement, what they believe in, including even religion. And once we break those myths, we will then have to demystify this issue of it's all about women. It's all about women's rights, you know. And that is why currently as we speak, and Houghton has actually mentioned about hate relationships. It's because we've clouded our minds, we have brought in our cultural biases, and now we are looking at women or the feminine aspect of our life as part of a problem in the society. I wish also to state that the reason as to why we speak more of the girl and the women is because for a long time, they are the ones who have been in the suffering corner. And by virtue of that, the data that we have demonstrates that it's the women and the girls who have been marginalized for a very, very long time. We also need to go deeper and look at the marginalized communities. You know, we also need to go even deeper and have this data integrated to the element of persons living with disability. And until we understand gender as a whole, we'll not be able to solve this problem. Because every time we talk about gender, it becomes a hate-love relationship. And that is the myth that we need to demystify going forward. When it comes to placements and jobs, and I like the fact that Ngek has really broken it down. It's just not one element of gender, but we have to look at the wage gap, we have to look at the education and the fairness when it comes to equal opportunities. The labor market, and I know when we talk about the labor market, everybody looks at government. But today I want to challenge everybody, right? Government has put proper policies in place through the Ministry of Gender. The policies are there. The Kenya National Policy on Gender and Development is a very robust document. What then needs to be done once the national policy is out? It needs to be cascaded down to all institutions. We have to go to the county governments and ask, have all the 47 counties put in place a gender policy? Yes or no? Right now, I think it's 7 of them out of the 47. Take note, the national policy on gender was actually put in place in 2019, actualized in 2002 under COBIA. So you can already see the government is already putting a lot in place. The problem is implementation. So we have to cascade down the national policies up to the county governments. And even at that level, the counties need even to go further and put in place a Gender Act. What is stopping us from putting in place the right laws that can actually help us mainstream gender? When you look at matters to do with access to health and education, you've seen what the government is doing right now. On matters health, the government is saying, he who can pay an extra coin, support those who can't. Personally, I've been paying my health insurance. From the time I got employment, I've never used it. Where I sit, I'm very comfortable that it's helping somebody else. But here we are always at loggerheads, you know. Government is putting measures, policies in place. We retrogress by fighting those policies or not putting them or actualizing them or not even participating in the policy making process. We wait until it is already up and running and then we do what? We run to court. So these are all avenues that are already there. I am so impressed that it is coming from GEC that State House is leading in terms of gender mainstreaming.
It's part of those who are leading.
Yes, part of those who are leading.
And
that is a good thing because, Joyce, it also needs someone from outside to look inside and say, you know, you guys, you're doing the right thing. Here, you're doing the wrong thing. And for us to move forward, we need to do this. Those are the kind of solutions we need. And I can assure you, this government has said we welcome all manners of criticism. Let them be constructive, so that we can move forward and we can help each other and we can help the country as a whole. Before I tie up there, I also want to say this. When it comes to femicide, and I'm sure we'll have this discussion at length,
because we have time.
We all need also to understand the fact that my office has been put in place at cabinet level to address these issues. You know, the fact that I'm seated here shows commitment from the president himself. And it's the one reason as to why this office was put in place to address gaps as and when they come before they escalate. And you've seen there's already traction in terms of addressing these issues, you know. And the one thing I'm telling everybody, we shout, we yell, then what next? We need to have these discussions, but we also need to have a progressive, solution-oriented activities, you know, well-driven. You've seen the Ministry of Interior has pronounced itself on this issue. Ministry of Gender has pronounced itself on this issue. The judiciary has gone ahead and pronounced itself on these issues. And you see, that is the whole of government approach that we want. Everybody must plug in.
Okay.
You saw the press release we had. DCI was seated there. And DCI is committed to give us timely reports, which it has.
Okay.
For the first time in the history of this country, we are actually having investigations that are done. Members of the public are actually given them information pronto, and they are moving together with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Joyce, I'm sure you want to respond to that, but some of the factors, and when we get back from this short commercial break, we'll be focusing on the question of education and access to that effect, and the patriarchy tendency, which still apparently appears to be the firm grip that drives many of the cultural norms in the country, and also the question of the commitment from the executive and on the part of Parliament, and the effect to that which was given by Chief Justice David Maraga, Emeritus now, of the dissolution of Parliament, the President's letter in December 2022 in regards to the memo he wrote to the Speaker of the House. And we'll be talking more about the two-thirds gender rule, the question of women in elective politics, and also the creation of opportunities, employment in terms of economic ones here on the broadcast. And we welcome your contributions. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. The discussion continues after the break here on the broadcast station.